realizing how little I know about making these videos and trying to do anything to make them look less has made me feel very old. So anyway, chapter 5 in Addy's Surprise. It's called Christmas Surprises. From that day on, Addy was allowed to spend her afternoons sewing in the warm shop with Mama and Mrs. Ford instead of the cold garret by herself. Business had begun to slow down. Mama and Mrs. Ford were just finishing up a few small items. 4 days before Christmas, Addy was straightening out the shop for Mrs. Ford. She loved to sort the buttons into boxes, arrange the feathers according to size, and straighten the creamy laces and loopy fringes. She carefully wound the ribbons back on their spools and organized the thread by color. She folded the beautiful fabrics and piled them neatly on the shelves. By the end of the afternoon, all that was left to do was to pick up the pins that had fallen on the floor in the Christmas bustle. Addy was on her hands and knees filling the pin box when the door burst open and in stormed an angry woman. Right behind her was a tall, plump girl. Addy knew the woman must be Mrs. Howell because she carried the beautiful green plaid dress that Mama had worked so hard on. She thrust it toward Mrs. Ford. "Look at this dress," she fumed. "Just look at it." Mrs. Ford took the dress and held it up in front of her. The seams on the sides were split open and the threads of the plaid fabric were frayed. The buttons on the back had popped off. The dress looked wrinkled and droopy as if someone had tossed it in a heap on the floor. "This dress was made too small," Mrs. Howell raged. "I've never seen such poor work." Addy looked at Mama, who kept her eyes on the sewing in her lap. Addy could see Mama's lips tighten in anger. "Stop it right there," Mrs. Ford said firmly. "Ruth Walker here is the best seamstress I've ever had working for me. I'm sure the dress was not made too small. It was sewn to the exact measurements we took at the fitting last month. Perhaps Isabella has grown some." Addy looked at Isabella. She stood near the door looking at her feet, her round face flushed pink. Mrs. Ford went on, "If you are unhappy, Mrs. Howell, I will give you a full refund, not because the dress was poorly made, but because you are dissatisfied." Mrs. Ford opened the drawer where she kept the money. She reached inside and took out a handful of bills, which she quickly counted in Mrs. Howell's hand. "Now, good day to you, madam," Mrs. Ford said coldly as she pushed the drawer shut with a bang. "Good day," said Mrs. Howell. A blast of cold air blew into the shop as the door slammed behind them. Mrs. Ford sat back down. As she picked up her sewing, she said, "I can't believe she acted that way. Some people have no idea what the Christmas season is all about." So here you can see Mrs. Howell looking all angry. Her daughter. You can see the mom. The mom is not having this. 0%. She is not here for this. She knows she made a good dress. As Christmas approached, almost no one came into the shop. All the dresses had been finished. Addy made her last delivery on the day before Christmas, taking a red hat to a lady on Society Hill. When she returned to the shop in the early afternoon, Mama wasn't there. "She's gone upstairs for a rest. Your mother's worked hard," said Mrs. Ford. "I plan to close the shop early this afternoon and take a rest myself." Addy started to head upstairs, but Mrs. Ford stopped her. "Before you go, Addy, I have one last package." She handed a parcel wrapped in brown paper to Addy. "Who is this for?" Addy asked. "Open it," said Mrs. Ford. "It's for you." Addy untied the package and could hardly believe what was inside. It was the green plaid dress Mama had made for Isabella Howell, but it looked like new. All the seams were repaired and the buttons had been replaced. "I want you to have this dress, Addy," said Mrs. Ford. "You've been such a big help to your mother and me this Christmas season. You have worked hard. I've made the dress smaller to fit you. The hem just needs to be cut to the right length. Slip the dress on now and I'll pin it right up before I leave." Addy didn't know what to say. She just stared at the dress. "Yes, ma'am," she said. Addy stood on a crate while Mrs. Ford kneeled on the floor, measuring the hem and putting pins in at the right length. Addy turned in a circle, taking tiny steps as the skirt of the dress was marked to the proper length. Then she took off the dress so Mrs. Ford could cut off the extra material. When Mrs. Ford was finished, the long, wide piece of material she had cut from the bottom of the dress was hanging around her neck. Seeing it gave Addy an idea. "Mrs. Ford, can I have the material you cut from the dress?" asked Addy. "Certainly, Addy," replied Mrs. Ford. "All this dress belongs to you. Now sit right down here and sew up the hem. You know how to do that. I'll be leaving now, but you can stay down here where the light is better and let your mother rest. When you're through, don't forget to put out the lamp." "Yes, ma'am," said Addy, "and thank you, Mrs. Ford. Thank you for such a beautiful dress." "You're welcome, Addy," said Mrs. Ford. "Merry Christmas." That's the dress seen here on the cover, which reminds me a lot of a dress I wore in a play when I was in elementary school. I was supposed to be a doll, a Christmas doll. Her dress is way prettier though, but it's a similar style. On Christmas morning, the sun shone brightly. Addy and Mama woke early, excited to spend their first Christmas in freedom. Mama spoke first. "I know you awake, Bright Eyes," she said. "Merry Christmas." "Merry Christmas, Mama," Addy said, sitting up in bed. Sun streamed in the window, and the frosty panes looked as though they were covered with delicate lace. "I got a surprise for you, honey," said Mama. She handed Addy a small parcel wrapped in paper. "I got one for you too, Mama," said Addy excitedly. "You open yours first," laughed Mama. So Addy untied the string. As the paper fell away, she saw a little rag doll with a bright red smile stitched on her face. She had a bow tucked in her hair, tiny hoop earrings, and a purple dress. Addy beamed with joy. "Mama, she's so pretty," she said happily, hugging the doll. "She's just as pretty as Janie was." Mama smiled at Addy. "I stuffed her with some beans I saved." Addy hugged the doll. Beans gave her a lumpy plumpness that Addy liked. "I'll call her Ida Bean," said Addy with a giggle. "Now, Mama, sit down and hide your eyes while I get my surprise for you. Don't look, 'cause mine ain't wrapped." Addy hopped out of bed and went across the room to her school satchel. She took out the gift she'd hidden inside. "Are your eyes still closed, Mama?" Addy asked, turning around. "Sure enough," said Mama. Addy ran across the floor and placed her gift on Mama's lap. "Now you can open your eyes," said Addy. When Mama looked down, there was a lovely scarf of beautiful green plaid before her. The edges were sewn with tiny perfect stitches, and the ends were fringed. "Addy, where'd you get this?" asked Mama in surprise. Addy told Mama all about the dress Mrs. Ford had prepared for her, and about the extra material that was left when she cut off the bottom to make the dress fit Addy. "I spent yesterday afternoon hemming the dress and making the extra material into a scarf for you, Mama," Addy explained. "Oh, Addy," said Mama gently, running her hands across the plaid. "It's beautiful. Ain't we going to look fine going to church this evening?" Mama gave Addy a long hug. "I'm proud of my girl," she said. Ida Bean sat on Addy's lap while she and Mama had breakfast together. Then Addy put on her apron and propped Ida Bean in a chair so she could watch as Addy and Mama made sweet potato pudding. There was some pudding left over, so Mama put in a small pan. "We can leave this one here and have it tomorrow," Mama said. By the middle of the afternoon, the pudding was done, and its sweet, spicy smell filled the tiny garret. Then Mama and Addy got ready for church. Addy wore her beautiful new dress, and Mama took time braiding and fixing Addy's hair. Mama put her new scarf round her neck and tied it in a big bow. Addy thought Mama had never looked more beautiful. "I'm going to take Ida Bean with me to show Sarah," said Addy, tucking the doll under her arm. Then Addy and Mama headed down the stairs and out to church. As they got closer to church, the sun was setting. They could hear the organ music. When they opened the big doors to the church and stepped inside, Addy knew that Sarah had been right. The altar did look magical, with the manger scene and the silvery star shining high above. Addy and Mama had just been seated when a loud chord blasted from the organ. The choir began to walk down the aisle, singing "Joy to the World" in strong, happy voices. A glow filled the dark church as the choir marched in. Each member held a candle that cast shadows into the church. Addy watched for Sarah, who was at the front of the choir. Sarah turned and smiled at Addy. Addy gave a shy wave back. She felt tears run down her cheeks. She was crying because the church was so beautiful and the choir sounded so good, and she and Mama were together. When the service was over, everyone went down to Fellowship Hall for dinner. There was turkey and dressing, squash and greens, cornbread and applesauce. Addy had never had so much food on her plate at one time. When it was time to go back for dessert, Addy ignored all the cakes and pies and headed straight for Mama's sweet potato pudding in the shining black skillet. As she savored each smooth, sweet bite, she thought about Papa, Sam, and Esther. Maybe next Christmas, she thought. Maybe next Christmas we'll all be together eating Mama's sweet potato pudding. After dinner, the adults lingered over their coffee while the children hurried to the room to set up for the shadow play. Sarah and Addy sat on a bench next to each other with Ida Bean snuggled between them. When all the children were settled, the door was closed. The lamps on the walls were blown out and the room was completely dark. The children squealed with excitement and pretended to be scared. After a minute, a lamp began to glow behind the sheet in the front of the room. All eyes watched as the first shadow figure appeared on the sheet and the Christmas story was read aloud. One figure and then another and another appeared on the sheet until soon Addy could see the shadow of Mary bent over the manger, holding her newborn baby, with Joseph standing at her side. 3 shepherds stood beside them. A deep rolling voice continued to read as all the children sat in the dark, quietly watching the shapes against the lighted sheet. As the star appeared to guide the wise men, the door at the side of the room opened. A shaft of light from the hall filled the darkened room. The children turned to see who had opened the door. It was a tall man. Though Addy could not see his face, his shadow was a shape she recognized. Addy jumped up and struggled through the rows of children, tripping over their feet, stumbling as she hurried to the door. Addy knew it was standing in the door, standing there right now. Not in a dream, not someday, but right now. Who do you think it is? I know who it is because I could see. Papa, she burst out. Papa, is that you? Is that my Addy? Came the answer. It was Papa. Addy rushed to him and he swept her up into his strong arms and held her close for a long time. So that's really nice, right? Her family, well, her father at least, is back with her. I thought that might happen in the very last book in the series, but bringing it out for Christmas. It was dark by the time Addy, Papa, and Mama headed back to the garret, walking hand in hand through the Christmas streets. When they got to the top of the stairs above Mrs. Ford's shop, Addy could see light under the door. That's strange, Mama said. We didn't leave the candle burning. When they opened the door, there on the table was a kerosene lamp shining brightly. Addy read the note lying beside it. May the hope of the Christmas season shine in your lives always. Merry Christmas from Mrs. Ford, she read. So here's the kind of lamp that they were using back at the time. So it's got actual fire in it, like a candle, but there's also kerosene. And that keeps the lamp lit, so it'll help them see at night for sewing. Papa turned away from Addy. What's wrong, Papa? She asked. Then she heard him. He was crying. Don't cry, Addy said. Papa faced Addy and knelt down in front of her. I'm crying because I'm so happy. I'm so proud you can read, he said. I always knew you was a smart girl. Addy doing so good in school, Mama said. She won a prize for spelling. Mama can read too and write, said Addy. I've been helping her and I can help you. Come sit at the table, you two, Mama said. I got something Papa might like. They sat down at the table and Mama brought the little pan of pudding that they'd set aside that morning. Sweet potato pudding, Papa exclaimed. Ruth, it was like you knew I was coming. We never stopped hoping, Mama said, smiling. Addy picked up Ida Bean and crawled into Papa's lap. Papa ate the pudding while he told Addy and Mama about the time since he was taken from them. Me and Sam was separated that very next day. I don't know where they took him, but I think it was further south. Or maybe he escaped, Addy said hopefully. So they don't know where Sam is. And Esther isn't with them either, so it's just Papa. So 2 members of their family are still missing. Maybe, Papa said. If there was a way for your brother to run, I know he found it. I couldn't, though. I was bound hand and foot all the way to my new plantation, and after all that, all us slaves on the plantation was freed 2 months after I got there. And then you found your way to Mama and me, Addy said. Then Mama and Addy told Papa about leaving Esther with Auntie Lula and Uncle Solomon, and escaping into the woods and on to freedom in Philadelphia. Papa was quiet for a minute, then he said, I'm going to try my best to get Esther and Sam back with us so we can all be together right here in Philadelphia like we planned. There was a Freedmen's Society in Maryland that helped me come here to you. Maybe the Freedmen's Society in Philadelphia can help us. Addy laid her head against Papa's chest. She felt certain that their dream would happen. One day, she said, we all going to be together. All of us with Esther and Sam, too. You tired, Addy, Mama said. It's time you got ready for bed. Can't I stay up longer, Addy asked. You want to sit up all night like a little old owl? Papa teased. Addy laughed. Yes, Papa, I want to stay up and be with you. Well, I ain't going nowhere. I'm going to be here when you wake up in the morning, Papa said. I'll be the first thing you see when the sun comes in that window. Addy loved that window from the second we moved in here, Mama said, but it got stuck about a month ago. We can't get it down. Let me have a look at it, Papa said. He lifted Addy off his lap and went over to the window. Mama and Addy followed him. Papa studied the window and then hit the frame in 2 places. Then he pulled down hard and closed the window. There, said Papa. Needs a new sash. I can make that, but it should be warmer in here now. It already is, said Addy. She and Mama put their arms around Papa. In the window, Addy could see their happy faces reflected in the glow of the lamplight. That ends our reading. We still have a peek into the past that we'll go into in the next video. This was a very sweet story, and I hope It brought you a little bit of happiness and brightness.